What's up, everybody? My name is Alex. I'm your host here on the Swole Friends podcast, as well as a co-founder and COO here at Swolverine. Swolverine is an endurance athlete and active lifestyle brand. We have over 33 different performance powders and daily health supplements that are all proprietary blend-free, clinically dosed, and scientifically proven effective. We also offer one-on-one nutrition coaching, online personal training, and competitive fitness programming in the functional and CrossFit space for athletes looking to pursue their ultimate potential with the Swole Kitchen. But enough of that. Here we are, episode 35, and I'm so excited to welcome John Whips. John Whips, we met a long time ago. I want to say almost, 3, 4, 5 years ago or so. He is
maybe even longer than that.
I know. When we started Swolverine, he was a huge help when we did, and kind of through the years. John is an industry professional and owner of Vitition, a brand that helps ensure that brands meet FDA and FTC rules, as well as industry standards in the supplement world, which is not very common, right? And so today on this episode, we're going to talk more about food and law regulations here in the US for dietary supplements. We're going to talk about key regulatory changes or challenges for companies, including things like labeling, claims, substantiation requirements. We're going to talk about misconceptions, myths about dietary supplements from an evidence-based and informational standpoint, as well as talk about the future of the dietary supplement market. We'll also get into, and especially for people maybe who aren't in the industry or who are consumers of supplements, or maybe you're here because you already consume Swolverine products, we want to talk to you and advise you on how to choose a brand and products that are right for your health and performance, while having critical thinking skills and finding the confidence to be reliable on those reputable sources for supplement information. So, mouthful. But John, there's so much to say about you. You do so much. You help so many companies. I feel like an introduction like that has to happen because you just, you're about to put on a clinic for people. So
you make me sound smarter than I am. Thank you.
You are very smart. I remember when you gave us the breakdown, it was a 40-page breakdown of 800 things wrong. And I was like, this guy knows what he's doing, Yeah,
it's certainly a niche market for regulatory work, but it is important, for one, protecting your brand and consumer health. So it was an interesting niche to get into, and I really like it and enjoy it, specifically for sports nutrition I like to focus on. But I'm excited to speak with you.
Absolutely. So tell me, how did you get started? We'll just kind of start there and we'll get into kind of the nitty gritties, but how did you get started in it?
Well, I've always been, into health and fitness, childhood playing sports and high school and college. And I was lucky enough to get on with bodybuild.com for several years and got in the regulatory department around 2016. And, at that point, they're bringing on a ton of third-party brands. And the company had been hit with some regulatory violations previously, around 2009, 2011. And so regulatory compliance was of the utmost importance to the executives at the time. So we were, tasked with reviewing all third-party labels, content they want to bring on. Social media was on the rise, so you have to be careful what you say there. So I was reviewing a ton of labels, and our team was, maybe not the most experienced with regulations. There's no degree that you can get for learning dietary supplement food regulations,
Yeah.
So it's just something that you have to, get thrown in the fire with. So we would spend a lot of time, looking at the regulations, applying it to the labels or content that, we're looking at. And it's really just kind of a risk-based assessment. If someone's very high risk, missing mandatory statements, or there's ingredients in there that shouldn't be in there, would pose a consumer risk, or, missing an allergen statement. Those are something that we would, not allow on. But being, the retailer, you'd have to bring on a certain amount of third-party brands just for sales. Anyway, that's kind of how I got started, was, diving into labeling every day at work. And as time went on, I just kind of developed an expertise in that. And, every day you learn more and more in regards to food and supplement regulations. So, you have your FDA, FTC, the plaintiff's attorneys that go after certain brands, and kind of grew into there. And at the end of my time at bodybuilding, it was late 2020. We had gotten a regulatory review service off the ground, basically what we were doing for free for these brands, like what we did with Swolverine. But, you attorneys and regulatory consultants charge a good amount for that. And we were doing it for free and providing brands all this information. So I'm like, well, let's try to monetize that and help the company out.
Well, and I'm glad you did. I mean, truthfully, because I remember sitting there with Walter, and we're looking at what you had provided us, and we're like, no way, this is what they're doing for us. No, like, this is insane. And it's a good thing. And I think that it reinforced a lot of like the standards when we became a partner of bodybuilding.com that you enforced, and it really meshed well, I think, with the standards that we have for our brand, right? And the transparency and like the just being honest. And like, you need to know what you're putting in your body, right? It shouldn't be a question. It shouldn't be like, oh, this hurt my kidneys or this killed my liver. Like,
right.
Like, what?
Industry has to be responsible, and that's it's easy to get into market for dietary supplements. That's the way the law was built. But the burden falls on the responsible party to make sure the product is safe to consume at the recommended dose. So, there's a lot of companies that don't do that. There's a lot of bad actors that give, the industry a bad name, but, brands like Swolverine do things the right way and really make a difference to consumers. So, we really enjoyed, while at bodybuilding, forming partnerships with companies like yours because, they put health and fitness foremost importance in the consumer's mind.
Yeah. And it's nice to have those partners, right? But the partners are few and far between. And so when you got into it, you had the platform, had the opportunity, and then that's kind of where Vietition really, you branched off into that and kind of have flourished in that role. But talk to us about the importance of compliance with the FDA, FTC. What are some of the things, like, I know a lot of people in general will be like, oh, well, supplements aren't regulated, or that's a really big thing, but that's as far as they know, right? They don't really know. Or they'll be like, oh, you're not NSF. Well, what? Like, so kind of give us an overview from the beginning on that.
Sure. Yeah. Number one myth is supplements aren't regulated, right? And you always see that in the mass media, but essentially, dietary supplements are a subset of food. They are heavily regulated under the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, and amended the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act, specifically for supplements, as well as Good Manufacturing Practices, 21 CFR Part 111. There's a lot of regulations as pertaining to labeling. There's FTC requirements for advertising and making claims. So there's a lot to think about when you're starting a product and doing the creation, I guess. There's the product side of it, the label, the ingredients, the advertising, the claims that you're making. There's quality control, quality assurance, the GMPs that the manufacturer needs to do, and you as the brand owner need to ensure that they are doing those things correctly, because you're ultimately responsible for what they are doing in creation of your product. You're the one with your name is on the product. So at the end of the day, you are responsible for everything. There's ingredient safety. Everything added to food is essentially a food additive, and it has to be safe to consume for recommended use. And all new food additives go through food additive petition through FDA, a safety assessment, essentially. There are some stipulations or exemptions to that. One being, if it's a GRAS substance, generally recognized as safe, that means that among the scientific community, this ingredient has been shown not to cause harm. It's safe to consume at this dosage, and it's been in the food supply. So it has to be a consensus among the scientific community that this is safe in order not to go through the food additive petition. That's for foods. As I mentioned, dietary supplements are a subset of foods. So if those ingredients are in the food supply, they can be in dietary supplements. If the ingredient has not been in a dietary supplement before, it's a new dietary ingredient. There's a few different, I guess, criteria for that. New dietary ingredients that have not been in the food supply, have to go through or should go through a new dietary ingredient notification process. And it's not a pre-market approval by any means of FDA. You submit a safety dossier. They look through it, essentially say that it's good to go or we need more information. Not a lot of brands do that. You'll see a ton of ingredients out there that should be seen as new dietary ingredients, but they have yet to submit that information, or they go through that GRAS loophole, have an independent body say that this substance is generally recognized as safe. Nothing wrong with that in my opinion, but there's no formal requirement from FDA to submit those documents in. It's the GRAS substance is a voluntary program to submit to FDA. So, ingredients could be GRAS, but you may not know it because there's no form like a required database to be seen. So,
but I think you're kind of dabbling on the line of like my next question, right? So supplements are regulated. They are a food-based product. This, such area of that. So where does it go wrong, right? So if we have the people who are maybe listening to this who are like, well, supplements are regulated. It's up to the consumer. And then you have the people who are like, wait, what? Like what? So where does this go wrong? Does this fall like a lot of times on the manufacturer? Does it fall a lot of times on the brand? Is it loopholes? Is it people making supplements in their bathtub? Like, I can't tell you how many times people are like, did you make this stuff in your kitchen? And I was like, love of God, no. No, I didn't make this.
I hope not.
Not consume it if I made this in my kitchen,
Yeah, I think there's a lot to it. It's kind of the way the food laws have been built in our country, starting with the first federal food law in 1906 was the Pure Food and Drug Act. Since then, they kind of just get stacked on top of each other. And how these laws are passed, typically requires consumer outrage or consumer tragedy, right? Consumer deaths. And the amendments to those laws basically address the issue at the time rather than being an all-encompassing law and regulation. And that makes it, one, difficult to navigate, and two, it doesn't solve future problems. So I honestly don't know where the unregulated claim for dietary supplements comes from some consumers. I mean, you can get on the Code of Federal Regulations and see all the regulations for yourself. You can go on FDA's site and they talk about how they regulate dietary supplements. There's warning letters issued every Tuesday afternoon on FDA's site that you can check out and see, some enforcement action from FDA regarding supplement brands that are not complying with the law. Yeah, I'm not sure. I think, there's a lot of people in the industry that think it's tinfoil hat time and, it's pharma people that are pushing that narrative because they want to dissolve the industry essentially and, take that industry share for themselves. So I'm not sure. It bothers me every time I hear it, because there's so much information out there that, yes, this is a regulated industry. It's very heavily regulated. And as far as, safety goes, it's very safe as compared to pharma, as compared to foods. Dietary supplements are very safe.
Yeah. And I think that too, I mean, you're also dabbling on the side of, it's relatively, I don't want to say this way, but it's relatively easy to start a supplement company or start a supplement, right? Like, yep. I'm just going to say that. Now, does that mean it's going to be good? No. Does that mean it's going to be, something that's worthy of putting in your body? No. Does that mean that? And I think a lot of people see it as like this money grab thing, right? Like, oh, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. I'm going to be a part of it. I'm going to get my share of it. So kind of like you're saying with the pharmaceutical side, like I'm going to get my share of this. Yep. I'm going to get my money out of this. So I think too, maybe the aspect of like where this goes wrong is because of the lack of trust in the people who represent those companies, right? Or why they started, and you're in the performance side of things, right? So how do you see, I mean, you've seen all kinds of brands. How does it differentiate between performance focused companies or like, the companies that do a lot of vitamins? What have been some of like the regulatory challenges or like the social challenges associated with those that you see that you maybe wish didn't happen or wish you happen a little bit more often?
Well, like you said, it's easy to create a supplement brand and get to market. So I think for the countless companies that do things the right way, that want to make a good product that benefits the consumer, there's the handful that are just in it for the quick buck and mislead the consumer, put adulterants in the product that are unsafe, and that's certainly one. It's eye catching to the media, and they can push that narrative, and then I guess it's easier for consumers to freak out essentially about a product they see as harmful to themselves. That generates more likes, more views than, oh, this company has been selling dietary supplements that have benefited consumers for 20 plus years. You'd never hear about news stories like that. It's always the one-off scenario where these guys are adulterating products, and it's a large issue among the trade industry,
Mm-hmm.
trade associations in the industry, excuse me, how to deal with those bad actors, right? Because they make a bad name for everyone. Some people like to put them on blast, because there's not a great way to go about it. FDA does not enforce against these people as well as they should. They have full capability to do so under the law. They very much lack in that area. I mentioned warning letters previously. They come out every Tuesday, and you can see when a company receives a warning letter for GMP violations or claims, disease claims, unsubstantiated claims, labeling violations, etc. But oftentimes there's not follow-up from the agency regarding that warning letter. Warning letter is not a final agency action. It's, hey, we investigated this. You're doing all of this wrong. If you receive a warning letter, they're going to list everything that you're doing wrong. And they give you, I think, 15 days to correct those issues and in writing provide it to them. And then they'll re-inspect. Sometimes that doesn't happen, maybe a lot of times, and there's not a lot of follow-up enforcement. Sometimes it can take years for that to happen. Some manufacturers have serious, violations of GMPs in their production facilities. And if there was one, while I was still at bodybuilding, I'm trying to remember, it was at upstate New York, but I think it took 10 years in total for the place to be shut down. They're still operating after multiple warning letters and everything. So, yeah, I don't know what the solution would be to curb the bad actors in the industry, but it's certainly a problem for the companies that do things the correct way.
Yeah. And it's definitely a little bit more of an uphill battle. I mean, most of our time is spent educating consumers or finding like ways to educate consumers or at least just get some information in their hands.
That's great. Right? I think there should be more of a grassroots program like that. Consumer advocacy is great. More companies should aim to educate like you guys do.
Well, and it's kind of funny too, because then you get the people who are like, well, just tell me what to take. Just do it. And I'm like, okay, but here's 3 reasons, like, here's why, you know what I mean? And I think that's as much as we as a company need to figure out what we're getting and why and what it goes through and who it's from and where it's at and that sorts of thing, like, we always advocate, like, the consumer needs to have that as well, right? Like, they need to be, like, advocate for themselves too, because who else is going to do it for you? Nobody, Right. And then there's the bad players, right, who are just like, yeah, cool, give me your money. I don't give a shit what happens to you, like, yeah, sure. You want to lose some weight? Take 50 of the fat burner. You don't need to take just 1 tablet. And that's where it gets really frustrating, like, as someone in the industry and someone who is trying to work with that and people who work with, oh, John, did I lose you? John, come back. All right. Hang tight, guys. Oh, bear with me. John, come back. For our listeners, I'll edit the audio on this one, but being live, this stuff happens. Let's see. Okay. He'll come back. Hopefully you guys are enjoying the show. If we have anyone watching, you can always slide in the comments too. So like if you're listening to this and you have questions, you can hop in the comments and ask questions as well. But we'll have him log back into the studio. Until then, I wore this snazzy little jacket to match my greenery here. Well, while we're waiting for John, if you're unfamiliar with the Swolverine side of things and the way we do things, as you know, extremely transparent. We have the blog on the website. We have over 800 pieces of original content. A lot of the information that we're talking about with John is like just what we talk about. What does the science say? What does the recommendation say? Is this product or is this ingredient safe? Are these things that you should be putting in your body? And if you are putting them in your body, why? Right? And you'll hear me if you've listened to the podcast before, talk about things like beta alanine, 3.2 grams or more. If you're taking a product with less than that, you're wasting your money or you're wasting your time, because it's not going to get you that intended effect or that intended claim. And so one of the things that when John hops back in that we're going to address are like some of the things that, he mentioned a word GMP, good manufacturing processes. What is that? We're going to talk about some myths and dietary supplements that we see on social media, or that people say, like kind of the idea that we started with, supplements aren't regulated. And they are for sure, but it is up to the company, and it is up to the people who support that. And it is,
we're back.
Oh, we're back. I was doing a little cameo.
Wonderful. Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. It totally happens. I mean, this is the beauty of live internet world.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so, yeah. All I was saying is that, we kind of talked about a little bit of regulatory challenges. We talked about GMP. We're getting into the ideas of like, what are misconceptions about dietary supplements, and how does a consumer navigate that, and what to look for? Right? How do they, if someone says this is going to help you, how do they believe that, or how do they know that? Right?
Yeah, that's tough, especially if you don't have any, formal education in human physiology or nutrition. I would suggest, finding a reputable brand, some brand that you feel has earned your trust. They look the part, they do the part, they show you exactly what's in the supplement. Third-party certifications are always good. You mentioned NSF at the start. Those are nice to have, but not necessary. If you're doing things the right way under the law, GMP certs aren't essential, but that brand should have, all the quality documents from the manufacturer on hand, all the raw ingredient C of A specs to ensure that the product, is meeting the required criteria.
You mentioned, so let's kind of get into that a little bit, right? So if you're following rules and regulations, right?
Mm-hmm.
Things like NSF, things like GMP versus CGMP, things like informed choice. Let's talk a little bit more about that. A lot of people will, kind of get, I think, in the siloed aspect of like, oh, if you don't have that, I'm not even going to look at you. I'm not even going to consider what's going on.
Yeah.
Why does it happen? And what happens there?
That might be more of from an athlete's perspective. You see all the time, athlete cries out that they tested positive for X substance and they blame it on a supplement. Maybe that's the case sometimes, but they're probably taking something they shouldn't in the first place. NSF, informed sport, informed choice, those really go into ensuring that there's no banned substances from WADA, or there's no adulterants. So they do a good job to reassure the consumer, that this is what's in the product and there's nothing that there should not be. But I think a brand can also do that themselves through educating the consumer, as you talked about, through transparency, through showing, online, for instance, not a lot of companies put, the supplement facts panel or the full label on there to view, to see what's actually in it, or
Or
any background information on the product. So, yeah,
mm-hmm.
there's a lot you can do. The certifications are nice, but I don't think they're necessary by any means.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think that, what are some of the, what about brands that are kind of third party tested, but not by NSF or Informed Choice? Does that kind of fall into the category that you just talked about? Like, finding a reputable brand that you can trust, who's transparent, who has those labels on there, who has the other ingredients.
Yeah, you mean like non-GMO and, those sort of certifications?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, those special label claims are nice as well. But again, like if you have the raw material documents, as you should, being a brand, for each product, each batch, you can tell yourself that it's, gluten-free or, non-GMO, because those are documents that the manufacturer can provide to you from the raw material suppliers. Having that certification, yep, good. It gives, consumer confidence for sure. But, GMP is the law, good manufacturing practices, and that's, to ensure the identity, purity, composition of, the product and the ingredients are essentially pure and wholesome and not adulterated. There's a lot of specifics to good manufacturing practices, starting with, does the facility have pests, or, is the lawn maintained well to prevent pests from entering the facility, through specifications, of the raw materials and everything. So there's a lot that goes into it. If they're doing it the right way, that's the bare minimum GMPs. I think that's why some brands seek those additional certifications to bolster their reputation in their product. But again, not necessary. The NSF, the Informed Choice, the Banned Substance Control Group, that's another great one too. Good if you want it, but yeah, not completely necessary.
So I'm going to come back to that one. I want to talk. Devin Perez just popped up here in the chat. What's up, Devin? What are some of the common things that you can look for on products that we should stay or shy away from? Also, some foods.
Sure. I guess from a supplement perspective, every ingredient should be clearly marked in the supplement facts panel. The law does allow for what's called proprietary blends, and I'm sure, Alex, you've seen this, heard of it, and I don't think there's anything wrong with it, but some bad actors have used that to their advantage and essentially pixie dust these blends where you don't have to list the weight of each ingredient, just the total weight of the blend. Mm-hmm. And that was created to protect IP. If X brand creates this matrix of 10 ingredients that has some positive health benefit, they don't want brand Y to take advantage of that. Well, the bad actors did take advantage of it. Maybe there's just a little bit of the beneficial ingredient in there, and then a lot of something that doesn't really help you out. As far as ingredients being declared properly, look for stuff that would stimulant type products, caffeine or hembine, those ingredients that would give you a stimulatory effect in any way. You need to ensure that you're not over consuming those materials, because if you drink coffee or energy drinks, that takes in totality of the amount of caffeine or stimulatory substance that you're consuming each day. Everyone is different. Everyone has potential health issues. So being able to understand the basics of a label is important, I think. Look at the directions for use. The directions of use should be clear and coincide with the recommended amount per serving on the label. There should be specific warnings based on that product's formula. Those warnings may include, caffeine or if an ingredient may be an issue with certain medication or a certain population, pregnant breastfeeding women, someone on a, blood control or blood pressure medication, something like that. So there's a lot to be aware of, but just understand what it potentially means for you as a consumer. Understand your potential health issues and what you want to put in your body, and just learn the basics of label reading.
Well, that's a big one too, because we get into, sometimes people message us or email us or chat and be like, can you give me this advice on my blood thinner medication? Or can you give us this advice on, I'm diabetic, can I do this? And while I want to help the people, there's also this idea of like, we put the supplement facts and everything on the website so you can send it to your physician, because we're not physicians, we are not doctors, right?
There you go. Perfect.
Because some people are like, well, F you don't want to help me. And I'm like, no, this is helping you. I promise. I promise this is helping you.
Some people just don't want to help themselves.
Yeah. And that's kind of an interesting thing too, right? And so there's definitely levels of consumers where, being able to find a brand and trust them and be like, oh, cool, I can take this, versus, I am going to apply some critical thinking to this. And then there's also the extremes of that, where it's like, I have picked this product tooth and nail, and I'm just not happy with anything. So before we get into kind of that kind of stuff, talk to me about Prop 65 warning. I feel like that's kind of a fun one. A lot of people might not know about that one.
That's a good one. Yeah. California Prop 65 is state specific to California. I'm trying to think of, it was the Safe Water and Drinking Act, something like that, of 1984 in California. Essentially, it started out as a positive law, positive intentions, essentially mandating that ingredients or finished products that have certain levels of chemicals that exceed thresholds that are known to the state of California to have detrimental health effects, specifically for cancer-causing agents or reproductive harming agents, that you have to have a warning on label, and now at the point of purchase as well, so online. Essentially, it's turned into a money grab from attorneys in the state who will purchase your product online or on store shelves, have it tested, for usually the big four heavy metals, because that's what's most commonly occurred in dietary supplements from herbal products, protein, chocolate, the like. That's lead, cadmium, arsenic, and mercury. Lead is probably the most likely to ping because there's a lower threshold for the reproductive harm, safe harbor warning. And essentially, if you are close or hit that threshold, you need to provide the consumer this warning before they consume it. It's essentially warning consuming this product expose you to lead, and it's known in the state of California to cause reproductive harm and toxicity.
I'm going to interrupt you real quick. Like, there's like things like, oh, there's shellfish in this product, and shellfish is something we're all pretty familiar with. Yeah. But then we hear things like lead, cadmium, arsenic, and we're like, what the, like, what? And then all of a sudden you're like, wait, you know what I mean? Because then there's this idea or the concept that heavy metals are in soil naturally, right? Yep. And a lot of times these are like fruits, vegetables, things, consumables are going to have them in them, yeah. Right? So it affects a lot of like plant-based ingredients, like plant protein, 100%. Like greens products. And so, I don't know. It's kind of
So the federal regulations, disallow products that have those same heavy metals in them, right? The threshold's just higher. And that's, based on sound science. The California laws may be a little too intense. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, like you said, anything that grows in the ground can leach and absorb the heavy metals, So for suppliers, test the soil. But I mean, if you eat a carrot, you're likely consuming small amounts of those those heavy metals and stuff as well. So yeah, you can't completely get away from it. It's just, like I said, it's kind of turned into just a money grab. It's unfortunate, but brands need to protect themselves. So having, your finished product tested for heavy metals, one, you should be doing that anyway. But you can see it on the finished product C of A, what the level is. And if you have any familiarity with Prop 55, and the thresholds there, you can make an informed choice and put the warning on there if you'd like, just to protect your brand. And again, it's only for the state of California. So, but state of California is one big and a huge economy. So if you're not shipping in there, you're missing out.
Yeah. Oh, what's up, Wes? Love this. Wes owns Coast Range CrossFit down in outside of Santa Cruz. So he knows all about California regulations. Probably better than we do, but we also have another person. What's up, Ann? Recently started seeing, I don't know how to say that. John, this is you.
Where am I looking here?
Instantized,
yeah.
Creatine. Any thoughts on this? What is it? Or is it just a hype word?
Marketing hype. Simple as that. Yeah.
Okay. Let's talk about hype. What's some of the other hype? What's the other bullshit that pisses you off and then you try to forget about by going and exercising?
Oh, a lot. Gosh, there's so many examples of that. I mean, I understand brands marketing because you have to make your product marketable, but putting a vast amount of adjectives out there or making it seem better than it is through explicit language or implied positioning, I don't like that. Yeah, the micronized, I mean, there's micronized creatine or instantized, but I mean, creatine's creatine at the end of the day. Creatine monohydrate, that works. There's tons of safety studies and performance enhancing studies on that. Trying to think of some good ones though, because you're dead on that. Brands use those types of words all the time to sell products and potentially mislead consumers. So
what about like blueberry razzmatazz? No, I'm just kidding. So when we talk about critical thinking, practical tips for people who are consuming supplements or maybe new to them, talk to us about that.
Well, I mean, first understand what you're putting in your body. You don't need to likely take 10, 15 different supplements. Start off with the basics and utilize some good online resources to educate yourself before you put it in your body. Speaking to your physician also would be beneficial. There's a lot of good information from EDU sites, from government sites as well. That's scientifically sound. Then you can go into people's blogs, or I wouldn't. It's a problem now, but trusting the fitness influencers of the world on what you should be taking, probably not the best idea. They're in it to sell product, and if they're not fully disclosing, that they're selling you the product, that's also an issue. So yeah, utilizing National Institutes of Health, they have dietary supplement fact sheet, which is very useful. All the vitamins, minerals, a lot of the herbal products that you see out there, they have some basic information on there. You can click into various studies that are on those ingredients, potential interactions with medications, as we talked about. So just, doing your own due diligence and homework before you dive in and purchase a product. Like I said, brands should be doing that as well. They're responsible for ensuring that the product is safe based on the recommended use, but everyone's different. So you need to, educate yourself and find something that works for you. I am a believer in supplements, a lot of them. There's some that I don't agree with. But again, yeah, use your critical thinking skills, as Alex suggests, and find the information that works for you.
In your opinion, when it comes to efficacy, Is third-party testing more important than clinical dosing for efficacy?
Well, the product should be free of adulterants, period. So the testing is necessary. But if you're making health-related structure function claims on an ingredient that doesn't have the efficacious dose in it, I mean, that's one, misleading to the consumer, and doesn't do anyone any good. So I wouldn't say one is above the other. I'd say they're both important.
If someone's looking at a brand and they don't have their supplement facts panel on their website, what
Red
is your
flag.
advice to them?
Red flag.
Okay. And why though? I mean, like, I could probably tell you why, but maybe someone in their head is like, well, why red flag? Why does that matter?
Well, why wouldn't they want to share what's in the product? If they're constantly pushing this product on you to market it, so they say 100 different things on how it can positively impact your life and your body, but they're not showing you what's actually in there before you purchase it. There's an issue there. I would never purchase anything like that unless I know what's in it, so you can see for yourself and do your homework. It's not a requirement right now on a federal level that the supplement facts and nutrition facts for food be present on your webpage. That's going to change. But again, I would ask yourself, if you see a product that you're interested in and it's not present on the website, ask the brand why. Why wouldn't it be? It's very simple to take that image and put it on the webpage. So yeah, I would say red flag for sure.
Yeah. And it's kind of funny, and it's not funny, but in my head, I'm kind of giggling because it's like finding a supplement company is kind of like dating, right? If they don't have their last name on their Instagram profile, red flag, right? Or, you know what I mean? Like, because you have to trust it. And this is your health. This is why it's important. It's not to like be better than someone else or to be snobby about a product. It's literally saying like, this is going to affect you, and it can affect you positively or negatively over time.
Right. 100%. And going back to the bad actors we talked about, it's really easy to start a supplement company, and those bad actors that we mentioned, they pop up all over on Amazon, eBay, their own D2Cs, because it's easy to do. You can set up a storefront, like that, have this product marketed on Instagram, TikTok, whatever, and as soon as regulators or attorneys catch wind of what you're doing, if it's adulterated or selling an illegal ingredient or whatever, they could shut down shop real fast and move on and then pop up somewhere else just as fast.
Yeah. And it's one of those things too where it's like, if you're using a product and you're bouncing back and forth between flavors because you're bored of it or it's not working, right? Or you're doing something and you're like, maybe I'll try this other one, maybe I'll try this one. Like, you're bouncing between companies and you're bouncing between products and flavors. There's got to be the point in this like mindset shift where you're just like, why is this happening? And why is it? Because it's not working? Is it not doing the intended effect that I was sold on?
Yeah.
Influencer A said it helps with this. Why am I not doing that? And there's sometimes too the aspect of like food and sleep and stress and basic things. But then there's also the idea of like, what is actually in that product? And a lot of times I think people look at the product and then that's when they are surprised or taken aback. They're like, oh, I don't know how to pronounce this, or where is the information? Or, whoa, why isn't anyone telling me this? And unfortunately, it happens a lot of times thereafter you've been taking it or you spent the money to do it, and supplements are expensive. I mean, whether they're worth it or not, they're expensive.
Yeah, there's not a simple solution to it, or there's multiple issues that can come about. And like you said, if people are just taking a supplement and hoping that it impacts them or helps them achieve their goal in a certain way, but they're not eating well or not exercising, or they're letting themselves go in another way, stress, lack of sleep, whatnot, like, you're probably not going to see the results that you want, regardless if it's an efficacious product or not.
Okay, here's a next question for you. Artificial sweeteners. Let's talk about those. Basically fine. Why are we so desperate to figure out what's wrong with them?
I think this is pretty similar to the mass media, taking a story where they have some grain of this could potentially harm consumers, that sells. So, like I mentioned before, any food additive, including sweeteners, colors, whatnot, has to go through the food additive petition to evaluate the safety. Most of those have been done a long time ago, probably, we were looking at 50 years for most of those sweeteners, and 30 years too. But I mean, at the time, the science is sound. Should they be reevaluated every now and then? Yes, I think so. But it's not just FDA looking at these, right? All developed nations have very similar laws as to the United States in regard to food law. There's also the global food standard setting agency called Codex Alimentarius, where all those developed nations are involved. If they're not saying that there's an issue with a certain sweetener, I don't think there is. Maybe at an extremely higher dose, but you're looking at the amounts used in these products are not high whatsoever. Maybe there's issue with it being used chronically at certain doses, and maybe science will review that soon. But I'm of the mind that you can take it if you want. If you want to use an alternative to an artificial sweetener, by all means, but just understand that natural doesn't necessarily mean that it's good for you as well. Most of our drugs come from plants. They're just at a certain strength and potency. So I don't know. The artificial sweeteners, I personally do try to stay away from a lot of them. Maybe there are some, health effects to it, but yeah, as far as safety goes, most of the ingredients in the food supply right now are pretty safe.
Well, I think supplements kind of get picked on a little bit, because it's like you can have less than 1 gram of sugar in a scoop of a product, yep. And then it's dubbed, this product's trash. This is ass. I mean, really, like, yep. I get a little vulgar with it. So what's kind of the idea behind that, the attitude, and how do you address that attitude and give that consumer the information that they need to decide, does 1 gram of this artificial sweetener really affect you?
Going back to probably doing your own due diligence, looking at the information available through clinical trials that are being done through, the National Institutes of Health website. Ask your physician, ask your the people in the pharmacy. They're very intelligent about this sort of thing as well.
Well, the people you're talking about are not, the first listed article on Apple News. It's not an influencer. It's not, someone.
Everything sell.
Yeah, and I think those are, asking the right people the right questions, not just asking everyone and seeking whatever answer you want. It's kind of like therapy. You can tell them whatever you want. They're going to believe you because that's what, right? Mm-hmm. So, yeah, anyways, I think that's good advice for sure. As far as you touched on natural and artificial flavoring, will you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. That's actually kind of a twofold thing. When you have a natural flavor, it's essentially, it has to be an essential oil or resin of that particular flavor. So, natural orange flavor would be an extract of orange peel or an oil of the orange peel, essentially. That's natural flavor. Artificial flavor, in the sense of being artificial, is, synthesized. It's not coming from a natural source, but it tastes like that. Part 2 is labeling, which gets tricky and is often done incorrectly on both foods and supplements. Because there's a couple tiers to it where, you can use just the natural flavors to flavor a product, but you might need regulatory copy on your principal display panel there that is artificially flavored. Because if you're using 3 different natural flavors to get a separate natural flavor or a separate flavor, that's artificially flavored because you're not using the single, I'm trying to think of a good example here. Fruit punch, fruit punch flavored pre-workout. You say on the fruit punch naturally flavored, but you're using 5 different flavorings for it to create that flavor profile. That's artificially flavored in the minds of the regulators. So you have to have that copy, even though essentially it is naturally flavored. That's a very common issue I see with labeling, and people do it wrong all the time.
Do you think that there should be a hard judgment or harsh judgment on a product? Let's say you love the product and it has natural and artificial flavoring in it, and then it's all of a sudden like, oh, it's artificial. I hate it. I hate it. And what type of advice do you have to someone who may think that way or maybe considering that type of thing? Does that matter as a consumer?
I think that comes down to consumer choice. I mean, people are entitled to their opinion. If they don't want to put, the hard artificial flavoring in their bodies, sure, there's alternatives out there. But as I said, keep in mind that if a product does say artificially flavored, they might not be using artificial flavors. It's just what they have to do to comply with the regulation. Mm-hmm. So look at the ingredient list. If there's actual artificial flavoring in there, it will say artificial flavor, but it might just be multiple natural flavors being used.
Well, and then that brings into question, like, goes back to the whole point of this podcast, right? Is like, are people following regulation and labeling rules? And you could have a company who, you might think it's the most natural thing out there, and maybe they're just not following compliance.
Yeah, but it's easy. It's easy to do because there's a lot of technical regulations for labeling. There's a ton of them, and if you're not familiar with them, well, you're not going to know, right? People are very reliant, or brands are very reliant on their contract manufacturer for turnkey services. And most of those contract manufacturers are excellent for quality control, getting the finished product that you want, the flavor profile that you want. But for the most part, they're not experts in labeling or advertising compliance, even though they offer the labeling services. So, that's kind of where I come in a lot too, is looking at those finished products and developing a good label for brands. So, I mentioned earlier, if you get a warning letter from FDA, they're going to list every single thing that's wrong with your product label, stemming from the most, monotonous or low risk type thing. And, they're going to say, fix this immediately. So it pays to do it right the first time. I don't think I've ever seen a perfect label. Even, probably after I'm done with it, there's a lot that goes into it. So, there's constant tweaks here and there. It pays to just continuously look at your product, just like you do with any part of your business. So it's certainly important.
Yeah, I definitely agree. We have a question from Ernie. What's up, Ernie? Are there any red flag particular ingredients to watch out for? There's so many ingredients.
Yeah, that one's, I think that's tough from a consumer perspective because a normal consumer likely wouldn't know what is allowable in a dietary supplement and what's not. This goes back to the new dietary ingredient provision of the law, where if it wasn't present in food supply or dietary supplement prior to the passing of DSHEA 1994, then you have to submit this new dietary ingredient notification to FDA. Say, we're putting this in market. Here's our safety evaluation on it. A lot of brands don't do that. There's probably, FDA actually put out a notice, I think it was the end of last year, that they're kind of gearing up to crack down on potential NDIs in the market that haven't been submitted to them. And I think there's quite a bit. You can go to, type in FDA new dietary ingredient notification. It'll bring you up to the page and you can publicly see what's been submitted and review that information. It's public information, public docket. So I think there's, I don't know. There hasn't been many submitted based on the growth of the industry since the passing of DSHEA. So I don't know. Any product that's touting prohormones or SARMs, those stay away from, unless you want to take them by all means, but those should not be in dietary supplements. Certain stimulant ingredients, like hard stimulant ingredients that have been cracked down on before by FDA and consumer groups like DMAA, that's still floating around despite being banned. DMHA, DMBA, a lot of the four-letter words. There's a couple out there that, well, it's easy for a company to use those stimulants and use a technique that's called a botanical mask. They say this compound comes from this plant and is extracted, but it's really not. It's synthesized, and they use a botanical cover ingredient to, create the narrative that this is natural and it should be allowed in dietary supplements. So all those stimulant ingredients I listed, those were, used as botanical covers were used, to get those ingredients on the market, and there's still some out there. So any hard stimulant like that, you can look at the FDA's website too. They have, what's it called now? Dietary supplement ingredient advisory list, something like that. I think they may have changed that. Let me look it up. Anyway, they list all ingredients or most ingredients that they have enforced upon. Some of those ingredients are completely fine, but it does give you an idea of what to look out for.
Well, then as a performance athlete, like a really easy one is just going to like the water list, look, just the banned supplement list is pretty black and white,
There you go.
And like, I think that's also been, more popular for athletes, especially, in our community, specifically catering to CrossFit, right? Or natural bodybuilders who are being tested and held against that standard. But then like as the general consumer, there are resources, including, the water list is great, but you might find something on the FDA list that's not on the water list, and so on and so forth.
100%. Oh, I can leave information in the chat here. I'll flood this thing.
Yes, you can. While you're looking that up, let's talk about protein spiking. Do companies still do this? Can you define it for our consumers that are not familiar with amino spiking or protein spiking, and what to do about that?
Yeah, I don't think it happens as much anymore, but I'm sure it does. Under the regulations, there's certain ways to test for protein content. And what those brands were doing was adding certain amounts of amino acids to essentially spike the nitrogen content of the protein and trick the test. The test that would allowable to be used to test for protein content, it would show a higher amount of protein than was actually in there. Because it's so frowned upon now, I don't think it happens very often, especially with, big brands that sell a lot of protein. You're not going to find it. They do it the right way because it's such a high risk. Consumer groups, plaintiffs' attorneys, they test products all the time. They're looking for brands that do things like that because of the notoriety of it. So if brands are still doing that, good luck. I don't know. It really just comes down to the type of test that you can do.
Talk to me about drinkables. So
RTDs?
Yeah. So we have a milk-based product that is 48 grams of protein, or 45 or 40, or you're looking at like, okay, if I'm thinking about Swolverine protein, that might be a scoop and a half. That might be 2 scoops of product. That might be anywhere between 30 and 60 grams of protein powder in a drink that's 8 ounces. How does a consumer navigate that if like they're looking to, we do nutrition coaching, we say, hey, go get this RTD or do this protein or do this. And then how does somebody navigate if that's actually true on RTDs? And RTDs are ready to drinks for anyone who doesn't know.
Yeah. Well, So a complete protein, right, is, a protein that has the right amount of all 9 essential amino acids in it, right? So whey protein has that. If you're looking at like a plant RTD, most plant proteins are not complete. So you might see a blend of ingredients, and I think soy is one of the only ones that's a complete plant protein. But you might see like combinations of pea, rice, bean, whatever it may be, to get that complete amino acid profile. Like I said, why whey is so popular is because it's, a one on the scale of the PDCAS is how to calculate protein content. It's a one on that scale, and that's why everyone uses it, because it's so abundant and works so well, and it's a complete protein and easily mixes into those drinks. So yeah, look, I mean, it goes back to being able to learn, basic label reading, what's in the product. Look at the supplement facts or nutrition facts panel, look at the ingredient list and determine what's in there, what type of protein.
Mm-hmm. I like that. So where do you think, John, that the FDA or FTC or whoever is, do you think they're going to start getting more involved? You mentioned something earlier about putting, supplement facts on the website, enforcing rules. And then where do you see that, implicating the future of the supplement industry?
Yeah. FDA is going through some changes right now. Yesterday, a deputy commissioner.
Uh-oh. Oh no. John. Okay, guys, hang tight. Hang tight. This is the fun part about live stuff. But hopefully you guys have liked it so far. I mean, it's a lot of really good information. I'll have him join back in and we will get to that question and kind of close out the podcast with the future. I know, right? When it was more good info. I know, it's like cliffhanger, right? We did it on purpose. It's actually intermission. Grab your popcorn. We got 10 more minutes. But we'll have him join again. You guys are great with the questions. These are really good. So, the other thing too, which is kind of some information that I'll share with you guys, is like in 1994, the Nutrition Labeling and Education Act, the NELA, was passed. So NELA gives the FDA the ability to review and actually approve health claims for dietary supplements and foods. However, like since the inception of NELA, in the earlier part, it's only reviewed a few claims. Oh, John, here we are. Hey.
I swear I'm not doing that on purpose. I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's okay. I mean, I told everyone we were, because it's like cliffhanger,
Yeah. Where were we? You were talking about.
Oh, we're just going to talk about the future of things. While you were out, I was bringing in the NELA Act, so the Nutrition Labeling and Education Act that you actually mentioned earlier in the 1994, and just how like since then it's only reviewed a few things. It's not really been super great at being crazy active.
Yeah, so the Nutrition Labeling Act basically mandated that nutrition information is present in all food products. That was 1990, I believe. Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act came to pass in 1994. That's specific to dietary supplement regulation. Mm-hmm. That's all under the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, the larger statute that was passed in 1938. There's tons of amendments to that. Food additive amendment, that was 1958. Color additives, 1960. There's food allergen, that came to pass. It's a huge issue. GMPs, I mentioned, adverse event reporting. The most recent or large scale one was 2011, the Food Safety Modernization Act, FSMA. That was 2011, and that has helped transform and make food in the country much safer. There's a lot more to be desired there, and they're doing some work there. But as I mentioned before I got cut off, was FDA is going through a potential transformation to revamp their food offices. They have not been doing a great job. An independent, or I guess a third-party congressional group basically gave them poor reviews. The Udall-Reagan Foundation, that was last year. They did, a deep dive into the foods program at FDA, and there are some serious concerns. And we can see it as consumers, and like I mentioned, they lack enforcement on dietary supplements, bad actors. Same with food, but they have full capability under the law to enforce against these bad actors and make the food supply more safe. So hopefully, having this new deputy commissioner and they get aligned helps with, in totality, food safety and supplement safety and enforcement. Their counterpart, the Food and Trade, or the Federal Trade Commission, FTC, they have actually done a pretty good job with enforcement lately. They're tasked with consumer protection over all industries, basically. But they do dial in on food and health products, dietary supplements. They have various rules. I think I sent it in the chat right before I got disconnected. Was they put out a health products compliance guide a while back, and this is an update to an earlier version. Basically, it outlines, all brand owners should look at this, by the way. Basically outlines what they expect for brands as far as claim substantiation of what you're saying. Essentially, any claim you're making must be truthful, not misleading, and well substantiated by credible scientific evidence. This kind of outlines it. Separately, they put forth a final Made in the USA rule not long ago, and they've heavily enforced that in various industries. Dietary supplements are included in that. They're put forth endorsement guides and a rule on banning fake, false reviews. They've enforced against that as well. There's an issue with brands on Amazon essentially launching a new product, and then these brands would take reviews from the older product or a similar product and review dump it into the new product to make it look like more people have purchased it, to make it look like a better product. So they have issued rules against fake endorsements, fake testimonials, that sort of thing. There's guidances on all those things on how to properly navigate it as well. So FTC, I think, does a good job policing the industry for consumer protection. There's a lot to it too.
And I think a big thing too that I want people to take away from this is, like, we're not trying to overload you with information. We're not trying to say, like, you shouldn't take anything because who knows what's in it. We don't want to do that. But it is to say that if you do have questions, you ought to be able to get answers to them, right?
Yep.
Especially with supplements, especially with things that are meant to help your performance, improve processes, and help you be a healthier, happier human being, right?
100%. Yeah. I'm a big advocate of supplements. I think there's a lot out there that work and do a good job. It's just, you want to purchase it from responsible industry. And there's a lot out there that don't do it the right way. So as you mentioned several times, it's about education.
Yeah, it is. And a lot of people don't get into the industry knowing very much, and some of us that do we know some things, but then you learn along the way. And I think that's another red flag too. If you're talking to someone who is using their information from 15 years ago, 20 years ago, ask them, well, why haven't you done any, why haven't you furthered your information and your knowledge? This stuff is changing all the time, right?
Rapid pace.
That should be exciting. Yep. That shouldn't be like discouraging. It shouldn't be like, oh no.
Yep, things change pretty rapidly as far as product development goes and ingredients. So
definitely staying on top of that.
And with the rise of generative AI as well, that's an issue FTC is combating right now too, with the fake reviews and testimonials. Because it's so easy for a program like that to falsely ramp up a product's reviews and make it seem like it's better than it is. And that goes again. Try to buy from reputable brands. Buying from TikTok groups or influencers like that, probably not the smartest idea.
And if it's a quick fix, it's probably not a good idea either.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
This has been so fun. Oh my gosh. John, it's so nice to connect with you again. We haven't talked in a little while and it's been a blast. I hope you guys who are listeners, our viewers, you guys have had a good time. If you want to kind of like monitor some things, we put some resources in the chat. We can also, you know, probably turn this into a blog post. Knowing us here at Swolverine, we'll make something a blog post if we want to.
Love
we'll
it.
put that up there. You can find John at vitician.co, or he is really active on LinkedIn. So very, very well known and respected professional in the industry, the supplement and regulatory space. So if you have questions or like something's popping around and you want to get in contact or just say what's up, thanks for doing the podcast. It was really good to watch you. Then you can hop on LinkedIn and find John Whips, last name Whipps. And John, if you didn't want that, I'm sorry, but
Probably fine. Yeah.
So for our consumers, become an informed consumer. Ask what it is before you put it in your mouth, right? I mean, is there any like other kind of advice you want to offer?
Look to a reputable brand like Swolverine. You know, those type of brands are really important. Like we've talked about all along, is find someone doing it the right way. If they're withholding information or it seems too good to be true, it probably is. So trust your gut, do your own research on it, find a reputable brand.
All right. You heard it from John first. So thanks you guys for tuning into the Swole Friends podcast. Make sure to subscribe here on YouTube where we go live, obviously, for all the fun things that happen while we're live. And we will catch you guys next time. If you miss this or you want to just listen to the audio and you don't want to look at our wonderful faces here or John's beard, you can listen to the Swole Friends podcast on Apple. You can listen to it on Spotify, Twitch, just about everywhere you can find podcasts. So, John, we'll catch you next time. To our viewers, thank you for chiming in and have a good day.